Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear sisters and brothers. Welcome to another episode of the Radio Resistance podcast. As always, I'm joined here by my dear brother and co-host, Zubair. Today, we'll be shedding light on a tragic series of events in Herat, Afghanistan, and how the repercussions also expose the Taliban's inadequacies in governance. To truly grasp the weight of recent events, one has to understand Herat's rich historical backdrop. It's often it's termed Herat has been termed as the Pearl of Khorasan, or in Farsi, as we say, Marwarid Khorasan. And Herat's prominence in Afghanistan is just unparalleled. This city, with its mud houses that echo centuries of, or this province, I should say, echo centuries of heritage, is a true testament to Afghanistan's spirit. But today, these very structures are at the heart of this province's vulnerability to these devastating earthquakes. Zubairjan, could you go over a bit of the statistics and?
Yeah. So thank you for that, and also I'd like to express my condolences to our people, the people of Afghanistan, and the victims who have been affected, who've those families who've lost their loved ones. Um, you know, Basically, what happened was Herat experienced 4 earthquakes in a span of less than 2 weeks. And all 4 of the main earthquakes, including one of the immediate aftershocks, were 6.3 in magnitude. This has affected at least 114,000 people, according to the UN. Basically, a chronology of the events on Saturday, October 7th at 11 a.m. was the first earthquake, a 6.3 magnitude, followed by a 6.3 magnitude aftershock only a half hour after that. And usually aftershocks are less in magnitude. So that just adds to the unfortunate effects that this had. On Wednesday, October 11th, so only 4 days later, a second large 6.3 magnitude earthquake, followed by smaller tremors, occurred. And then on Sunday, October 15th, a third 6.3 magnitude earthquake hit Herat around 8 a.m. So that's technically the fourth one, because the second tremor, or the second aftershock, was also 6.3. So that's 6.3 magnitude earthquakes in a span of less than 2 weeks, a span of 2 weeks. And it's just very unfortunate because Afghanistan is in a situation where they don't have uh, the proper, government and authorities and help to come in for the relief of even one earthquake. But when you have 4 in a span of 2 weeks, it's just the tragedy is unbelievable. So in terms of the number of casualties, the numbers actually vary, but we'll go with some of the more popular, or the more mainstream results, which is the Doctors
Uh,
Without Borders. They cited,
Zubairjan,
yeah,
what do you mean by that they vary? As in, like, with different reports, or?
sorry, yeah, that's what I meant. So different reports will put the numbers differently, right? So it ranges from, we've seen from 2000 going as high as nearing 5,000. But I think the number that I was going to read, which was according to the Ministry of Public Health and the Herat Regional Hospital, a minimum of 2,445 reported deaths and 2,400 injuries so far. And the latest, I guess, local sources from other news outlets in Afghanistan, they put the casualties closer to 5,000. Some of the other organizations put it at like 2,100, something like that. So I think a fair estimate at this point, because this was updated almost a day ago, um, we're close to 3,000 people that have been, unfortunately killed by this earthquake. And that number could be anywhere. It could be even higher because there's victims who are still trapped beneath rubble. And then I guess the next thing would be, well, who's helped so far? Like what kind of relief has been sent so far? Um, so according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, they put together actually a Herat Earthquake Response Plan. So immediately after, when the earthquake took place on that first day, the next day they sent engineers and other humanitarian workers to assess the situation. What happened. They brought some aid with them in those early days, but they came up with this plan, Herat Earthquake Response Plan, which is very detailed. Actually, there's a very uh, detailed plan that shows infographics and bar charts and all kind of detailed statistics, coming up with $93.6 million would be required to rapidly deliver life-saving response activities and to support early recovery efforts. So this is for a 6-month plan that they need to uh, allocate this much money is needed to respond to this tragic earthquake in a span of 6 months. Of course, after that, if need be, they would need to raise even more money. Um, but unfortunately, that 93.6 million hasn't been delivered yet. No, it would require other countries to pledge their supports, and that has only been done by, so far, the United States pledged 13 million. The European Union has pledged 3.5 million, and some of the other countries in the region have pledged even less amounts. So there's still a lot that is needed in terms of aid that is to be directly deployed on the ground to help the people. And we'll get to some of that stuff later in terms of specific organizations that are helping and whatnot. So go ahead, Kumel, if you wanted to touch on in terms of the current government or lack of, what has their response been?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Lack of a response, it would be the best way to
Yeah.
phrase it and put it. But sure, yeah, we'll share both their claims and um, shed some light on which of those claims uh, have some degree of truth and which ones don't. Of
Hmm.
course, the world's eyes are on the Taliban. So how have they reacted to this massive disaster? Officially speaking, there's been gestures, surveys from their so-called disasters department, and apparently there was a visit by their deputy prime minister. Uh, Essentially and ultimately, these are just photo ops or promises of relief assistance. But ground reports show and suggest that these are all performative um, actions. And um, yeah, many of the locals, both you and I have been in touch with, right? And but pretty much anywhere, and you look through any of these articles have been published by those on the ground, working for different NGOs on the ground as well. And they all claim the same thing. They haven't seen a penny of the promised aid coming from the Taliban. Um, Even more disturbing, um, it was something that I saw on social media. Uh, Besides them not providing any aid, um, there were a lot of these videos and images coming out where we saw the brave and resilient people of Herat themselves, coming to help one another, especially when it came, or the specific videos that I'm referring to are those where we see, Heratis digging graves for loved ones that were lost, right? And you see then the Taliban coming in and planting their flags on these graves,
Oh yeah.
you know. It's just a symbolic act that is obviously, uh, more about marking their territory than any sort of genuine authority, right? Um, Furthermore, uh, it's not like Hibatullah speaks anyway, but and for those who don't know, that's the Taliban supreme leader.
Supreme leader, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't say a single word. He hasn't said anything about the earthquakes. No statements, no public statements or anything coming from him as well. I mentioned this disasters department earlier as well, but that so they sent the Mullah Brother, right, Abdul Ghani Brother, um, and his team to deliver immediate relief assistance, but literally not a single um, piece of evidence showing that they've done anything. So that's yeah, that was their response, or again, the lack of a proper response, and it just goes to show. I earlier in the beginning of our episode used the word inadequacies for them, but that's not it. It's not that they're inadequate; they're just completely incompetent. What
Non-existent.
does non-existent governance, right? It's literally the world, and when I say the world, and it's sure there are nation states coming to the aid of the people of Afghanistan, um, but it's private citizens for the most part around the world. And as far as even objectives for our viewers, I'd like them to know this, that with this episode, one of the primary objectives of ours was to record this episode to um, call on each and every one of you, call on ourselves to show up, right? I mean, of course, we can't be there, we can't be on the ground, we can't help in those ways, but $5, a dollar goes a really long way over there. But yeah, sorry, going back to just their response. One um, other area of concern, I'd say, right, is the concerns over the funds that the Taliban are receiving, meant for aid for the people, right? Um, so with the international community, rallying to support, you mentioned some of those statistics as well. The question is, where will these funds essentially go? Um, and both history and recent events raise red flags about, at the very least, about the Taliban's misappropriation of aid.
Mm-hmm.
It's already been proven. In fact, yesterday, I think it was just yesterday or the day before. I haven't read the entire report, but I um, noticed and saw that Seagar
Yeah.
came out with a report on um, aid specific for Afghanistan's education sector, coming from the United States of America, was being misappropriated by the Taliban. Um, and the report goes over the details. We'll surely add a link to that as well in the YouTube bio of ours for this episode. I mean, but yeah, so the Taliban's recent establishment of this commission to oversee aid, it might seem to those who don't know the Taliban like a step in the right direction, but it's important to, with what was just mentioned, to remain extremely cautious and vigilant. while Zabiullah Mujahid, the Taliban spokesman, um, promises a corruption-free approach. Uh, you can't help but be skeptical with what we see. It's actions that we're judging, right? Um, Especially when, in the context of these earthquakes, we hear from the reports from locals reporting, distressing incidents. Like one of another example of this was uh, the selling of UNICEF tents meant for victims. Right? UNICEF is
Who?
sending tents, and the Taliban are
Uh,
selling these tents to those poor families who have, are suffering, and
yeah.
their homes have just been destroyed. And the Taliban's even trying to make more money on top of the aid that they are receiving, right?
Right.
Um, yeah,
I
yeah.
think it was a pretty high amount too. I remember seeing that. It was like they sold the tents for $260. That's
Yeah,
that's a lot of money for a tent that was given for free by a international aid organization. They're selling that to the victims. That's crazy.
absolutely, man. Yeah. So, yeah. To conclude, the situation in Herat, it truly demands our collective attention, especially with what's going on around the world right now. And, um, Afghanistan is barely getting any attention. Um, it's of utmost importance, and we cannot stress enough the immediate need for aid, but it's also equally important um, to address the incompetencies of the Taliban. So yeah, as we rally, to support the victims, uh, let's stay informed, keep asking the right questions, and ensure that the aid truly does reach those in need. Um, yeah, so that's been, their response, and uh, kind of a little more into uh, how they're messing things up even after a disaster.
Yeah.
Um, Further.
And I think to add to that as well, it's not just when you're saying their incompetency. When I said non-existence before, you look at the videos and images that have been shared so far. I haven't seen in any one of these like an actual search and rescue team like deployed by the Taliban in terms of you don't see any equipment, you don't see any actual like employees, like workers for the government going like
Mhm.
being on the front lines and searching through the rubble and rescuing people from underneath. You see that in every other country, every other disaster that strikes any place. You'll see the countries, their own organizations, their own people first on the front lines, and then you'll also see later on you'll see Red Cross workers and Doctors Without Borders doing their thing and UNICEF doing their thing. But I haven't seen it. I don't think they don't exist. I mean, the Taliban don't have excavators and they don't have or even if they do, they didn't bring them in. They didn't deploy the stuff to Herat to search through the rubble and to save as many possible victims as they can. I haven't seen any images of this. So again, if you're going to take over a country or you're going to try to rule a country, um, if you're not capable of doing it, or if you don't have any intention of actually trying to save the people, then why are you ruling over them? That's one of the key things that people should question. Um, but anyway, I guess we go to let's move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say, Zubaydjan, yeah,
hmm
you hit the nail on the coffin right there. The leadership of a nation
yeah,
is tested in times of crises, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, I mean, not that anyone believed in the Taliban prior to. these natural disasters. I mean, their coming itself was a disaster, but in moments of national tragedy, such as these devastating earthquakes, that's when you see, true
Exactly.
leaders rising and guiding their nations through such, turmoil. But
That's a very good point.
the fact that their supreme leader, it's a deafening silence from him.
We haven't
That
heard
that
him
says
yet.
everything. That literally says everything. Yeah, sure, we haven't heard him right at all, but at times, there are these statements that who knows whether he exists or not, right? But like, at least there's that statement that it's coming, or the thing. The fact that he not a single word from this guy, right? It it says it all. They don't
Hmm.
care. They just don't care. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but the very act of planting their flags on graves, a place of mourning, it shows what their focus is. It's been nothing but
Propaganda.
propaganda. That's
Yeah.
literally propaganda over empathy, right?
Yeah.
Man, this gets me quite heated talking about this, to be
And it's not
honest.
even
But
like it's not like we're being necessarily biased here. This is just the facts. Like if you go and look, this is what's happening. There's no contradiction here. But yeah, we could go on forever about their incompetency and in regards to ruling a nation. How can we help? How
I
can
mean,
people
I,
help? Hmm.
right before that, yeah, yeah, absolutely, we can go on forever. But it's like, we've talked about this before too, bro. But like,
Yeah.
specifically right now, just that thought going through my head, it's like,
Hmm.
how how can anyone expect for people to trust such a group, right?
Yeah.
After, like, with bigger goals, like such as rebuilding an entire
Yeah.
country, or these guys can't resist siphoning off aid that's meant for earthquake victims.
Selling
If they
tents.
selling tents,
Yeah.
if they can't prioritize the well-being there's of the citizens of Afghanistan, right? I mean, why would there even be any sort of insistence on uh, dialogue, working with them
Yeah.
towards what, right? There's
Exactly.
absolutely, what I want to just say here is that there's zero hope, um, for any sort of day-to-day governance coming from them. As you mentioned earlier, like, they don't have any kind of agencies or departments with qualified individuals. They'll call, what was this, disasters relief, the commission that they put together. In fact, like, I didn't want to go into too much detail on this until we see what they're actually do and don't do. But everyone's assessment at the moment is and based off of the past 2 years. We've seen what they've done with aid money, right? Money that's been meant for aid. Um, Many are predicting that this whole thing is just, they're just trying to find another avenue to get even more money for themselves, right? Um, Under the pretext of um, uh, helping people, which, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Yeah, you wanted to. I think. Sorry, Azerbaijan, for interrupting, but yeah, I think you wanted to mention some of the ways that people can help.
yeah, because I guess that's just what's more concrete at this point, right? We could critique the Taliban all we want, and it's valid, but how can we actually help? I think we have to look at platforms and organizations that ensure direct aid to the affected, right? So, uh, in when we are donating, obviously there's going to be a lot of people or organizations that have been popping up, saying that we're such and such and we're bringing aid to Afghanistan. But if they're not reputable, if they're not known, we should definitely avoid donating to such organizations, because they could be scammers that are just taking money for themselves, or these could be organizations, within the Taliban to take aid and send them to their own fighters or whatever. Um, but the role of the diaspora and the international community in rallying support is actually very important as well. Um, Afghanistan, like you said earlier, is already a forgotten nation, a forgotten country in regards to geopolitics. There's just so much going on in the world that Afghanistan has, fortunately, it's been in the backseat. No one really cares about what's going on there. They're focused on other conflicts. So I think it's very important that we, as a diaspora, need to raise awareness for our own people more than anything. And that doesn't mean we can't do two things at once. If there's something else going on somewhere else, of course, we stand with the oppressed anywhere. But our own people right now are forgotten. They are literally voiceless, as even before the earthquake. But now, when they're in a moment of tragedy and they need help, not much is happening for them. No one's really coming to their aid. Of course, the UN has put together that package, where they're saying we this much is needed for help, but that help isn't really being sent. So let's just continue, obviously, raising awareness, bringing it to the forefront, because this is not a small issue. I mean, 6.3 magnitude earthquakes happening in 2 weeks. The videos, when you see the pictures of the destruction, it's unbelievable. And then, and specifically, what are there any fundraisers? Are there any organizations that we can donate to? There are several, but we'll just list, I guess, three of the more famous ones that have been active. Right, one of them is a seal, which everyone knows, a very reputable. They're an app actually where they've raised thousands for this earthquake alone. They have specific campaigns, and they have a very transparent method in regards to showing what happened to the money that you donated. They'll show you that, uh, basically giving you receipts and images of like specific families that they've fed, the aid packages that you've purchased for sending there. They'll show you all that. So a seal app is definitely trustworthy. That's where we should donate to. But at the same time, we should also spread out our donations and um, for the other ones as well, because every app or every fundraiser is doing something slightly different. Some of them reach the ground much quicker. Some of them go through different avenues, raising funds for different things. So the second one is Mosaic Afghanistan. They have raised £20,000 so far, and they are targeting 50,000 British pounds. They have sent 155 tents to one of the afflicted provinces. Zindajan was one of the main epicenters, I guess, of the earthquake. And there was also several other districts. I think these tents were sent to either one or spread out. I don't remember. But they also intend to rebuild homes. I think they're going to start out with, it says 3 to 5, but then they're going to, based off of how that goes, they're going to continue on that. And they also intend to help and with food and health supply items. And then there's also from someone, a local activist, the prominent Herati activist by the name of Angela Khayur. She has set up a couple of different fundraisers. One of them was through a, what do you call it, GoFundMe, and that one is still up on her bio. We'll attach all these links. But yeah, she's a human rights activist, an education activist, a founder and director of the Herat School. Um, so yeah, there's different avenues where we can put our money towards that will help these people who are in need. And I think we shouldn't hesitate to donate towards a good cause. That's pretty much it from my part, Kumail.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to add. Um, so as we conclude, I mean, there is, so I think it's very imperative to mention, um, So, well, something that was very inspiring for myself, right? Seeing the resilience of the Herati people, um, their response to these tragedies uh, shows that um, the enduring spirit of the people of Afghanistan at large.
Yeah.
Whether it's grappling with the oppressive uh, shackles of the Taliban's gender apartheid regime, or facing the ravages of these sort of natural disasters. Um, we've seen, the Herati people, how they consistently come together, showcasing the best of community solidarity and compassion, right? Um, yeah, and so I guess the reason I mentioned this is this spirit offers lessons, uh, offer many for myself, and I'm sure to all. It just reminds us the power of unity in such times, right? The power of unity in times of adversity. Um, and as a final message to our listeners, our words here aim to just shed light, but it's only our collective action that'll cast away the dark shadows. Let's all please support the ongoing relief efforts, the ones that John mentioned, are vetted by us, right? In any way we can, and just continue to amplify the voices of the people of Afghanistan. A sincere thank you to you all for listening, for being part of our discussion today at the Radio Resistance podcast. Let's keep the momentum going, uh, keep resisting until our next episode. Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.